Okay, well, speaking of adaptation, I must apologize for speaking to you in English. Um, Before 1980, I could speak quite good French, but um, then I moved from England to Holland and I had to learn Dutch, which takes so much space on your hard disk. Yeah, close. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers very much for inviting me to this very stimulating meeting. It's really good to see such work going on in France, which has not been, migrant health has not been very strong in France in the last 2 decades, but it's obviously a very high standard. Now, when I first started working in this field, which was in the 1990s, we used to call it migrant-friendly healthcare. And here's a typical project, migrant-friendly hospitals, from nearly 20 years ago. You can see Avicenne Hôpital Avicenne is there in the middle of France. Quite a strong network. Unfortunately, it's now taboo to be migrant-friendly. It's not politically correct. We've been told multiculturalism is dead. We have not been told what the alternative is, but it's dead. So we now talk about something different. We call it health equity for migrants, which is actually, I think, a better title. We don't have to be friendly to any particular group. We just have to treat people in a fair way, avoiding unfair differences. And another change that's happened is that we're much less concerned with health care and more about health. We have started to move upstream. So we look at the social determinants of migrants' health. I have to keep an eye on the time. Thank you. It's in particular for health protection, reducing risk factors that undermine migrants' health, and not just looking after people when they get ill. You probably know this statement by Michael Marmot. Why treat people and send them back to the conditions that made them sick? Okay. Unfortunately, this shift is going very slowly. Most work is still fixated on healthcare and treatment rather than prevention. Now, before you can tackle inequalities, you need to know what they are. You need data about them. And the big problem in migrant health has been for many years a lack of data. And not just data, but systematic data, so that you can compare countries with each other and you can identify strong points and weak points inside each country. And what I'm going to talk about is a project for mapping inequities in migrant health. It's called the MIPEX Health Strand. I spent the last 10 years of my life on it. The first thing we had to do was to develop an instrument, a measuring instrument for systematically scoring in inequities. The point about being systematic is that up to now we have a lot of data on these questions, but it's impossible to synthesize them. They use different concepts and different methods, they work in different countries, and you can't get the big picture. Now, we did this in the context of a larger survey called the Migrant Integration. Oh yeah, this is the Migrant MIPEX Health strand. By the way, if you want to read these publications, you just have to Google them. You will find this everywhere. What is MIPEX? Well, MIPEX is the Migrant Integration Policy Index. It has existed since 2005, and up to now it had 7 strands or policy areas. And the first step was to persuade the MIPEX people to add another strand on health. Now, what happened first was, let's see. First of all, I got funding for a cost action in 2011, adapting European health services to diversity, and we joined forces with the IOM in Brussels, International Organization for Migration, and then we persuaded the MIPEX people to make this new strand. There was a lot of resistance in the beginning, but we persuaded them in the end. So in fact, it was 4 organizations all working together, because there's a Spanish and a Belgian branch of MIPEX. And it was enormous. It was about 160 researchers working in 42 countries. And we got our money from the European Commission and the IOM. And I will show you the end product at the beginning. And that's this. These are the final scores that we got. They go from red to blue, from hot to cold. And red is what you want to be. Blue is what you don't want to be. You see the blue countries are mostly in Eastern Europe. You should not take these scores too seriously. The reason is they're very approximate. We only have 5 scales. But the total score can be misleading. I will show you in a minute how misleading it can be, because people can be good or bad in different ways. And that's true in migrant health as well. So another point is very, very important. We do not look at a representative sample of the whole country in every country. We look at the places where the migrants are, and they tend to be much more migrant-friendly, if I may use that word, than the rest of the country. In many countries, you have an area which is hopeless for migrants, except in one place. Paris used to be like that in France. Anyway, that's the end of the story. Let me take you back to the beginning. Well, when is the beginning? It's not in 2012 when we started this work, but it started before then, in 2008, because you can't make an instrument unless you know what to measure. You have to decide what to put in your questionnaires. And luckily, there was a project from 2008 from the Council of Europe, by the Council of Europe, which tried to do exactly what we needed. In other words, to find out what countries should do in order to make the health system equitable for migrants. There's a lot of recommendations like this, for example, from the World Health Organization, but they all say very similar things. And they have 2 basic ideas. One is upstream, reduce the health risks for migrants And 2, downstream, is ensure access to good quality health services. And they produced, the recommendations were in 6 categories. The first 2 are more or less background knowledge, the importance of data and background knowledge. And then number 6 is mainly concerned with social determinants of health, and the rest are about health services. And when we finished, I worked on this committee that produced the recommendations. I was very frustrated at the end because they just got published on the website and sent to the member states of Council of Europe, and then nothing happened. And I wanted to use these recommendations to make a measuring instrument to see how good or bad the countries were in health equity for migrants. So that's why I looked for these organizations to work together. And there were many lucky accidents on the way, I have to say. I had no idea it would succeed. But the first problem we had was a technical one. The Council of Europe had 6 categories, and we needed 4, because MyPEX always uses 4 dimensions. So we used this trick. We put numbers 1 and 2 in number 6. It's a very, very simple trick, but it solved the problem. 6 is general measures to promote change, so it's like data collection and governance and so on. Now, these are the 4 scales or dimensions of the strand. First, A and B are about access, and we distinguish between hard barriers to access, and that means the legal entitlements, and the soft barriers, which have to do with lack of information or health literacy or whatever. So access, the first one is called entitlement, the second one is called accessibility, and together they make access. Responsiveness is what we used to call cultural competence. That's not really fashionable anymore. Cultural and linguistic competence is better. But it has to do with changing the services to be more responsive to the needs of migrants. And like I said, the 4th scale, D, is about data collection, research, governance, and so on. Health in all policies. Now I get down to breakdown. I'll show you the breakdown of the scale. You can combine the first 2 and call them access, and the second 2 you can call them quality, because in fact they're very strongly correlated. And if you do that, you get a picture like this. Now I don't think you can see all the details and the letters, but let me show the first interesting contrast is between France and the UK. And it's a really big contrast. In France, you have very good access and rather bad quality. That's to say, lack of adaptation. In the UK, you used to have good access and good quality, but then we had an election in 2010, and the Conservatives came in, and they decided that migrants should not have direct access to the national health system. So they had to pay. So the score for access went down. Another point is, when you look at the EU 13, the recent EU countries since 2004, they are the green dots. They have much worse scores on everything than the blue dots, which are the EU 15. To some extent, that's a question of money, because these scores are very strongly, I mean, half the variance in the MIPEC scores are explained by GDP, but it's not the whole story. You have a very anti-migrant ideology in many Eastern Europe countries. You can see that in the politics at the moment. You can look at it, the same thing this way. You see the EU15 is above EU13, especially on responsiveness. EU13 health systems refuse to adapt. And then the next one is, if you look at the red dots, those are the traditional countries of migration. That's USA, Australia, Canada, New Zealand. Canada was not, well, I won't spend time on it, but Canada should have been together with the rest, but they had a government under Stephen Harper who abolished lots of migrant-friendly measures. So there they have much more access on quality of care. They're right over on the right than on access. You can do it this way. You see, EU is actually better on entitlements. EU15, I don't count EU13 because they're not even trying, but EU15 does better, but not on responsiveness. Now, finally, we can look at the differences between categories of migrants, because with entitlements we distinguish legal migrants, asylum seekers, and UDMs. These are the richer half of the EU and the poorer half. And you see that legal migrants are not getting 100% entitlement, even in the rich countries. There is no excuse for not giving them 100% entitlement. They should have the same rights. UDMs, undocumented migrants, we know that they are badly treated, but I didn't know they were so badly treated. I mean, these are very small entitlements. And asylum seekers should also be better, because they're supposed to have guaranteed minimum standards for healthcare. So I'll leave it at that. You can look up the publications. We have a publication in the European Journal of Public Health this year on the topic. We hope people will do lots more research with our data, and we look forward to the next round of the survey in 2020. Thank you very much.